Welcome. Been reading about you. When do you sleep?
I could do it more sleeping now. I get enough, thankfully.
Oh my God, that's a full schedule.
Yep. Yep.
Um, you went to Bose games as a kid, a lot, with your dad from Finglas. That's where the thing started. How is it in 2011 you're invited onto the board?
No, I wasn't invited on, to be fair. Like the board, anyone can go for the board of the club. And in 2011, I've said before, like Bose was really in a really bad place in 2011. So, season before and the seasons preceding that, a lot of success, a lot of big budget teams, really good teams, some of the best players I've ever played at the club. And then, post the financial crash, the thing falls apart essentially because the value of the stadium plummets. We've borrowed against a property deal that doesn't materialise, and the club is left with about 5 to 6 million of debt that it can't service, and there's a lien on the stadium. So the stadium was in jeopardy. And I suppose shortly after I joined the board, and when I say I joined, like you stand for election and the members elect you or not, I stood unopposed. So it was a foregone conclusion. So there was no I suppose, there's nothing to pat yourself on the back over.
Okay, because I hadn't appreciated maybe the fan ownership aspect and where the club was. And so I make it year 23, 24 then. And I was thinking, geez, what is it about this prodigy that they're like,
Oh, no, nothing
come
like
onto
that.
the board?
Now, shortly after I joined, we had a meeting with there was a financial, kind of a financial organisation that was offered us kind of help, I suppose, that we needed.
Yeah.
And the first meeting in with them, they said the company was balance sheet insolvent. There was a fear of reckless trading, and people should bear in mind that if they had any assets, they potentially could be seized in the event that the club went out of business. So I lived with my mum and dad at that age. I had nothing to lose, so I think that's the main reason I ended up on the board.
Okay, you didn't sign their house down as against the
Oh,
club.
no.
So you're just football mad and loved the club and was a member and just wanted to throw yourself in and get involved and do something exciting. That was kind of the impetus, was it really?
Yeah, I should say, like, I'm not, it sounds a mad thing to say, I'm not like a huge football, I don't watch, like, I wouldn't sit down and watch, a Premier League game or something. I liked what Bose stood for, I liked what it was about, and I liked the going to Bose games and experiencing that, and especially what the club stood for and the fan ownership model. And obviously, loved going to the games, but I'm not like, I wouldn't be somebody if a random game was on, sit down and watch a Spanish game or a French game. It's just, grew up, played more GA growing up, did play football as well. But no, just I studied business and marketing, and I just felt that the club could be better at promoting itself and talking about itself and what it stood for. And it was, I think, fair to say at that time, doing a lot of marketing things that were very, very basic. And look, all done by volunteers. There was nothing wrong with what was being done, but it was sort of doing what the other clubs were doing. But it had a totally different story to tell. So, we have a different story than the rest of the clubs in the league, and we should, and all clubs do. But I feel ours has great depth to it.
I was reading 2015 club membership had dropped to as low as kind of 400, 420 territory. What's it at these days, club membership?
About 2,500. It's just capped due to the stadium, and actually people want to sit in the Jody stand.
Yeah.
So there are some members in the Des Kelly, but ultimately it's about our membership is tied to being able to go to the game.
Okay.
So that limits us. So yeah, you've seen a kind of a fivefold, and historically the membership only went from 420 to 550, and we had records to 1952. So over that period of time, of a 60-year period, membership didn't fluctuate a whole lot. There wasn't a lot of people who wanted to be a member of Bohemians, for better or for worse, and that's changed massively, in the last 6-7 years.
And so if, we'll get onto stadium in a moment, but say there was an 8,000 seater stadium, would you anticipate we have room, or sorry, with the appetite for far more members based on applications?
Oh yeah. No, I like I've said this, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way against any other club in the league. We'll have the highest average attendance in the league. I'm certain of it. We've the lowest attendance variance rate, so it's 7% is our one. I think after that's 29%. So we sell out every game. It's very rare that we don't, and it's because obviously away fans haven't. So it's a club normally, but it's always from outside of Dublin. Yeah. Maybe long travel distance, they're not doing great at the table. So I think that we will fill that stadium every single game, irrespective of the opponent and irrespective of where we are. And look, that stadium changes our finances. We're a lot more likely to challenge post the stadium, but even that will be difficult given the new owners and things. But yeah, I think we'll fill the place.
Okay. So you were commercial and marketing director then from kind of 12 onwards. Did you have a clear vision? Say, take where Bose are now and what they represent and where, what they've come to kind of be. Did you pretty early on have a fairly clear vision of where this has to go, or was it more feeling your way in, or how has this come to pass?
No, a lot of things, like so many people have done so much work, like the growth of our youth section, the women's team that have come in and they're in the cup final in a couple of weeks. But I think ultimately, what the initial step was, the challenge we had was 2007, 8, 9, 10, and the period preceding that. We'd spent a lot of money, and the draw for coming to Dalymount at that time was we will win. And we won a lot of trophies, and we had great players, great managers, and they won a lot. And we went in the space maybe between 2010 to 2011, where our prospects of winning things were pretty much zero, and our prospect of being relegated, which had never happened and hasn't happened, was pretty high. So I suppose, what are you selling, in inverted commas? We'd said, come and see a great team that's going to win things. That now is totally impossible. And it was about trying to create an environment where people bought into what the club stood for, and they had a sense of pride in the club. Of course, they're going to be annoyed if we don't win on a Friday night, or they'd be angry or whatever, but that wasn't the be all and end all, because hitching ourselves to that didn't make any sense anymore. And through doing that, linking into other groups of people, like I've never had a marketing budget, but we did a lot of marketing, and that was down to whether it was, in the early days, artists and poets and, all kinds of things. We did bands and trying to link in with people and kind of create a hub where, in a city that's increasingly difficult to navigate unless you have a lot of money, that you could find a place at Bohemians. And then, football was obviously one of the key reasons you're there, but there could be other things that you had skills in, and it could be a platform for you. And that was the early sort of days when we started doing the murals in the stadium, getting bands in, DJs in, the poster series, club poets, our own beers. People kind of laughed at it. A lot of clubs have done it since, but it essentially just creates just more things going on. Because if you take away that from a club, what is it? It's an hour every week in the season, or 90 minutes, and every second week. So 90 minutes every second week.
Yeah.
It's not enough.
Defined by the result.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. I guess the jerseys has kind of become this phenomenon. When did you start thinking in those terms, that this actually could be a vehicle for something very interesting?
It's kind of by accident, really, because like, there was the Refugees Welcome shirt, obviously, and that was, I think, 2020.
Yeah.
Before that, there was the thing with the Marley shirt, which was well publicised, but
that was the Bob Marley shirt was 19.
Yeah, and that wasn't permitted. And then we obviously changed the shirt, and we had kind of a solidarity kind of fist on it, like the Black Panther symbol and like international solidarity symbol. But that shirt and the Refugees Welcome shirts, they sold really well. They reached into media in terms of beyond sports media. They raised a lot of money for good causes. We'd been working with people in the rec division, still do. It was something that we were particularly strong at, and something we're very proud of at the club. And it just sort of became obvious that, I suppose, if you look at a League of Ireland club, like in comparison to international, and it's changed now. We've two teams in the group stage this year for the first time ever. But in general, for most clubs, you're totally restricted in terms of your income. So your gate, like for us, our ground's full. Yeah. We earn what we do on the gates. No TV money we're talking about. Very little centralised commercial money. Very small transfers, albeit changing. But you need an exceptional income line. And if you're going to be a fan-owned football club in our league to exist, you need that. For Sligo, it's their fundraising. And for Bose, it's increasingly become our shirts, but it needs to become more about fundraising for us as well.
Yeah. Because it's kind of best sides of both worlds, as in, be it, I suppose, in particular, Refugees Welcome, the Palestinian cause, plus, Fontaine's, Bob Marley, etc. But it's become this, and Oasis latterly, a phenomenal commercial success, and yet has imbued the club with that kind of thing that you wanted to stand for, I suppose, in different ways. Was the initial driver, though, we need to make money? And if I did Bob Marley in a shirt, that's going to be cool, and it might sell a few shirts outside of Ireland. So money first, and then the social conscience afterwards, or do you remember when you're trying to dream it up?
No, because you just didn't know how it was going to land. Like the Refugees Welcome shirt, you just don't know. Like, will that be responded to really badly? I remember the Marley one, I thought, you change, I was really confident in that. And then when I spoke to people, they're like, geez, maybe, we put that out on a pre-sale originally when we changed it, and it went really well when we changed when Marley was off it, and we had and then they gave us permission the following year. But I suppose, no, it wasn't setting out to say, it was about trying to communicate the values of a club, trying to show that our club is different than other clubs, and its main difference is its fan ownership model, which we only have us in Sligo left, and so many of the clubs have changed their model. Nothing wrong with changing it, wouldn't be for me. But I suppose large part of it was the history of Dalymount too. There's a lot of things that have happened, and how can you communicate that to a bigger audience? And I always kind of give the analogy, like if this table in front of us was world football, League of Ireland clubs, we used to sell 400 home shirts, 580 away, because the grounds are so small. Like, so if 1 in 10 of your home fans buys a new shirt every year, you've 3, 4, 500. But suddenly, the audience for a Bose shirt is people of a certain mindset globally.
Yeah.
And we sell shirts every day, to all around the globe. And it tends to be somebody who maybe is a bit kind of unhappy with the way modern football has become. Maybe he's a little bit left leaning. Maybe has an interest in music and certain bands or whatever. But that potential audience for a Bose to buy a Bose shirt has become quite enormous, and that income enables us to keep our model and compete. So, there's a direct correlation between the success of every football club on the planet and the wealth of their owner.
Sure.
You can more or less take a league table and just put the cost of the squad. There's some exceptions to it, but it holds pretty true. And if we're going to keep our model, and we've had to exist for the last decade with a stadium that's too small, definitely the last 5-6 years, if we didn't have them, we'd be in trouble. So thankfully it's happened, but we shouldn't overly depend on it either. The new stadium will deliver extra income. We do need to be better at fundraising, but it's been great to be able to. And I think that the reason why did Oasis say yes? Why do Fontaines want to do stuff with us? Lizzie, whoever. I think they do it mainly because of the model. I think if you go there and, you're saying, well, look, we've got an owner here, I don't think that conversation goes any further.
Well, I was reading, I think once the Marley family found out it's a non-for-profit club, fan-owned club, that's a different conversation as opposed to Roman Abramovich wants to leverage Bob's popularity. So it's a different conversation then.
Oh, yeah. People assume when they hear a football club, they just assume. You ask a kid, what does a football club owner look like? 6-year-old kid, 7-year-old kid, you go into a school and do it. They'll all say, it's a rich man. That's what they'll say, because that's what most of football is, sadly. But it's not us. Yeah.
So, I'm sure you don't want to divulge your accounts, but typical jerseys, I was reading, League of Ireland might account for 5% of revenue. Bose, it could be as high as 40%. The Oasis one seems to have gone supernova, no pun intended. Our producer was at the Oasis concert in Mexico. There's a lot of knockoffs over there, by the way. There's definitely people. I don't know if they're giving you the share, but no pressure with the next one.
No, and that's, look, I think, Ian, like it is this year, it'll be the best performing year, given that, Fontaines, Guinness, Oasis, it'll be over 50% of revenue. But look, in one way, I think we should take a lot of pride in that as a football club, that we've managed to do that. We should be very thankful to the people who've partnered with us. But, like you've said there, these are ideas. An idea can work out or it can fall. Yeah. So it is a difficult thing to continue. What I would say is our base has grown. A number of people are aware of the club, our mailing list, all of those things are quite vast now. And that means that, it won't have a huge fall off. But it does mean, and look, part of the last couple of years has been trying to navigate the period before the new ground. And we are getting much closer to that. So hopefully, I think we can keep the shirts as high as they are. Brilliant, and then other income streams need to grow as well. But it's served us well.
Yeah, we don't want to be reduced to what jersey do Bose have next year, and that's kind of, it stops there. It has to be more sustainable.
We should say, look, I ran the number this morning. Look, we've given €199,000 so far to Medical Aid for Palestinians. There's over €40,000 due for them in the last couple of months as well. By the end of the year, we'll be well over $250,000, and that's just one shirt and one charity.
Yeah.
So the benefits to the people that we partner with. We've sent, I think definitely a six-figure sum to both Irish Community Care Manchester and to Music Generation Ireland. So there's been really, the Aslan shirt, there was €142,000, which is more than the league winner gets, and that was sent to St. Francis Hospice. So there's been very significant beneficiaries from these, and that's brilliant. And we've also been able to highlight issues that we feel are important. So It's not just about Bose.
No, I hear you. Were Oasis tricky, or was it straightforward, or a bit of both?
It's really, really straightforward. Just through the Kneecap stuff, managed to know the right people to ask, and they're into it. They're up for it. I think it was either going to be it was a really long shot. Obviously, either they were going to not respond or be into it, and they were into it. And huge, fair play. Fair play to them for it.
Did you dream up Oasis?
I tried to do Oasis about 10 years ago, believe it or not. No less, about 8 years ago, and it didn't go anywhere. We had a mock-up of one about 8 years ago.
Okay.
And just, I think a lot of things is having the right phone number to contact.
But geez, the timing. I mean, this year of all years for it to come through. Because I've spoke to a few people about you, which might sound kind of disconcerting. It's not that. Quite a few of them use the word genius about you.
I wouldn't go for that now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But what you've done commercially, people have used that line about you. How do you kind of dream it up, I suppose? Or how, you know, because you could go in so many different directions, and you're both trying to stand for something and also maybe capture a mood, and maybe if you try and capture the mood too hard and it's too try hardy, it doesn't feel authentic, and like there's a real there's a little tightrope that you're sort of walking here. So
Well, there's
like,
plenty of detractors. Like there are people who.
No, I know,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
think there's as many actually as maybe Twitter would indicate. But
but like, are you thinking about it in the shower? Do you sit down and kind of?
no, I've too many. I mean this in a kind of it's not a good thing. I've just my brain would go pretty fast. Like, you know, I'd have ideas and things all the time. Too many. Sometimes try to do too many things at the same time. But definitely wouldn't use the word genius. What's being great with Bose is, and it's actually true of Kneecap as well. Bose is a real authentic thing in a world of clubs that have become, as I said, privatized, commodified, and I think removed themselves from the people they were supposed to represent in quite a large way. And they become, you know, more often than not, a plaything for wealthy people who come in, lose a bit, don't care, you know, buy a yacht, buy a supercar, it devalues, I don't care, I'll enjoy the ride or whatever. And I think that's what football has become. Bose hasn't become that, and that is down to the members of the club, the people who've cared for it and nurtured it, the volunteers. And it's a very enjoyable thing to be employed by Bose, to work for Bose, to try and come up with ideas that could improve the football club. Because I suppose what the club stands for and what it is quite rare, and it needs to bring in more money than it's ever brought in to just exist within the group of clubs that, like I said to somebody yesterday in the FAI, 5 or 6 years ago, I think for the preceding 30 years, a club like Bose could budget to make a profit and stay in the division. And that is no longer the case for most clubs. Like the collective losses last year were 8.3 million. So a lot of clubs, and I think that's why a lot of them have privatised, it's very difficult now. It's a very competitive league. There's a lot of people willing to lose a lot of money. And that creates a very, very difficult situation for fan-owned football.
Yeah. What do you think's kind of going on in the country at the moment? Or say around Bose, it might be too broad a question to say around the country, but there is like the revival of the language. We can chat some Kneecap later on, but you know, it's sort of in all aspects. So people want to learn the language again. I had a son 6 months ago. I was chatting to the nurse in the maternity ward. We were struggling to come up with a name, and she was listing off the names all around. Irish all the way.
Did she pick your name?
No, she didn't. It took us another few weeks, but it was just try. Yeah, Tig, Naisha, on I went. So that's kind of bubbling away. And then the League of Ireland attendances. It's more than pandemic rebound, I think. What kind of do you think is happening at the moment amongst a cohort of Irish people?
I think things have been, like when you have, you know, the extent, the reach of global capital that we have now, everything's homogenized. I think people move through the world and feel like what they're doing is everything's so similar, you know. And like, I mean that even when you fly to, you know, like fly to a different country, same shops, same clothes, same, you know, pennies everywhere, there's Tesco, or whatever it is, just this commodification of everything means that the idea, the kind of feeling that maybe what you're involved in is unique to you or has meaning or has depth to it is maybe being. I remember like one of the Kneecap lads saying a few years ago, I think Leo Radker was Taoiseach or somebody's like he doesn't care about the language. He doesn't want people speaking Irish. They want people speaking English so they can work on Facebook. And there's a lot of truth to that, where these things are put in as like, you know, we're promoting this, but ultimately they want a homogenous kind of individual who can, you know, slot into increasingly specific roles within organisations and just act as an agent of capital. And I think that leaves people feeling maybe a bit hollow, you know, that maybe, you know, going out and, you know, you see it even with pub chains and, you know, all these types of things where, you know, your experience going through your life as a person in Dublin might be kind of replicated in multiple cities, and that like, and even talk about football, like, you know, this multi-club model is outrageous. It's outrageous. The whole premise of football and the rule book is that each club acts as an independent, rational actor. When someone owns multiple clubs, the whole thing makes no sense anymore. So I think that's maybe people are looking for something that's maybe, you know, just a bit real. Sounds maybe quite macro, but just want to experience something. Maybe that's why young kids want to go to League of Ireland grounds where, you know, I have to say always they're not allowed and stuff, but there are flares. Some of them sneak in, you know, people maybe are having cans beforehand, whatever. It's a cheap night out and it makes you feel like you're a part of something. Dublin doesn't offer a lot of that anymore.
Yeah. I did see a photo of Bang Bang Cafe. I've never been, apologies, but I think it's the lyric from your wife's band, Above the Door, is it?
Yeah.
We look for signs that Dublin's heart is still beating. Quite profound, that. Sounds like an emergency.
Yeah, but I think that's a lot of what, you know, a lot of what the city is now. You go around it and it's just, yeah, a lot of the, like, you know, you control all the things around where you say, you know, there's a loss of independent shops, independent cafes, there's the loss of nightclubs, the price of property. But like, you know, it's not a good city to live in. All the barometers you'll be told by, you know, you had a government minister in here, they tell you, well, all the GDP figures look great, but that doesn't relate to people's experience. You know, I remember one, and I'm not an expert on the environment. We have someone opposed for that. But I remember reading this thing, and it's true that like in the 1980s, we had something like 700 pristine rivers in Ireland. Today there's 6. And someone will tell you the 80s was a basket case, but like the place that we live was like it had 100 times more pristine rivers. And that's just one example, I suppose, that maybe our strive for like financial success hasn't created a great place for particularly young people to live.
Yeah. It's funny, maybe because League of Ireland clubs, I say with love, were such basket cases in many ways. Are like, I don't think the venture capitalists were going to, like, it wasn't like, let's hone in on this. It was almost like, let's ignore that, and then in its own vacuum was sort of allowed to flourish without all the bullshit.
Yeah, I think I see that in the stadiums as well. Like, obviously, they've just been kind of left alone for a long time, you know, and some of that is good and some of it's bad.
Yeah.
I think most people probably don't realise that the low ticket price, I think, has played quite a big role in the growth of the league.
What is a ticket price these days?
Depending on which ground you're going to, you're looking at a maximum about €22. Yeah. But you can go to a ground as a student for a tenner, you know, and that hasn't kept up with, I think you could go as a student to Dalymount for 10 or 20 years ago, you know. It's the price of everything else that you see, especially I see it in Dalymount. I'm sure it's the same in the urban clubs in particular, but a lot of new people are a lot of young people. And I do come back to that point that for them to just exist in Dublin, you could come to Dalymount and, you know, for 20 quid, maybe someone who's first year in college or whatever, have 2 pints and come in. Can't do a lot for 20 quid around and do it with a group of people who are similar to you.
Yeah. Has there been any or much resistance or nervousness within the Bose family about this strong political output over the last number of years?
Like, it depends on it, I suppose. So on the political point, like, Bose don't endorse political candidates. You know, we don't get into party politics. I would say that, like, you know, is it true that some of what we've done would be more to the left in general, right? I'd say that's probably a fair comment. But I would say that the structure of the football club, it's a football club that rejects the private owner model. Like, the members have rejected the private owner model. So it would sort of indicate that the owners of the club are actually semi-rejecting that model anyway. If you go on to, like I said, into Twitter or Facebook or something, you'll see an awful lot of detractors. It doesn't really come up at AGMs or anything like that. I think we've been very, like, the board of the club sign off on any actions the club take. Like, I certainly don't, or any of the other employees of the club. But I do think, like, we obviously campaigned in the marriage equality referendum. We're the only sports club in the country to do that. It was the right thing to do. The board decided to do it. We then ended up, and now have still, sadly, the only LGBT supporters club in League of Ireland football, which directly came from that. So, you know, if you think that there's not gay players and gay fans in every ground, you're an idiot. Yeah. So why shouldn't these people feel welcome? And, like, Palestine playing the Palestinian national team, their first time in Europe, was that political, or was that, like, you know, a really solid thing to do just from a perspective of humanity?
Yeah.
I'd say the latter. So I think a lot of what we do, it's different to what the other clubs do, but the other clubs, private owners avoid risk because they have large amount of capital, and we don't. So I think I'm, you know, personally quite proud of what the club does, and I think that it's not something that comes up at AGM. We have a lot of members, and it doesn't seem to be something that the membership, you know, the actions we've taken, they've never generated large debate at AGM. They're the owners, so I think that's...
And so you said there, like, we discuss what direction we might go with a jersey or a stance on something that we believe in. Are there balances and checks there in a big way? Because my sense from the outside, and I appreciate it's from the outside, is that you're a driving force of this, and you have an instinct for what chimes with people and what's right. So if I've looked on from afar as a neutral, but been, you know, thought good on him. I'd be somewhat worried, like, God, if Dan left, God, what do Bose stand for now? Because I feel, and he might say, no, it's lots of us, but I feel he's the driving force. He goes, we're almost back to square one. What cause are we about now? Or equally, and this is sort of a nonsense point, but just take the extremity of it for what it's worth. What if the next guy in is like, we want to release the hostages jersey, or...
Palestinian hostages.
Ireland is full. You know what I mean? Refugees welcome. No, I think Ireland is full. That's the direction. We're standing for Irish people, and makes that argument. What balances and checks are there so it's not like Dan Lambert's driven this?
Yeah, no, I haven't, and that's saying I shouldn't. If it's appeared that way, that's probably down to poor communication, whether from me or from the football club. So, like, if you think of something, I've said this before, like our work with people in direct provision. Like, I didn't know what direct provision was until one of our members, Kevin Brannigan, who was, I think, was on second captain, he told me. I remember him telling me it was something that him and another group of members and people who were in the MBB were doing work on. I suppose then you can build on that and the club can support it. Likewise, our work with the LGBT community, like the marriage equality, I didn't drive that. There was somebody who I won't name who felt that was important for personal reasons and brought it to the board of the club, and they supported it. And I remember that board meeting, and to me wasn't something I'd actually considered. So I suppose likewise, I think like Palestinian solidarity, thankfully in this country it's widespread, and at League of Ireland clubs, I don't think there's a club where you don't see a Palestine flag, whether it's Derry, Galway, Shells, Bose, Rovers, and you see on the marches in town groups of Shamrock Rovers fans, Bose fans. So I don't think any of these issues, I actually can't think of one, to be honest, that I would have said, well, this is, and I shouldn't be able to. Nobody should be able to do that. I do think that if there is something that the club, that and it should be that, like, the club, a privately owned football club, really the decision making is very top down, because the owner ultimately, it's their entity, it belongs to them. With Bose, it always has to be bottom up. Okay. And I do think we've tons of, like, we've a Friends of Palestine subcommittee, we've a Pride committee, and they've met for years, and they work on our activities in terms of the Pride, and the club can innovatively support that. So I think we can kind of take what they want to do, or groups that have come forward, and build upon it. But I think if that's the way it's appeared, it's not a good thing, and I don't think it's not the truth.
Yeah, it could be my mistake, and often you're the face of it, so it's interesting to hear that. Daily Mount. I don't know. I mean,
we're nearly there.
Are we?
Yeah.
So people will know, obviously, late last year, the government came through with €25 million. So they've kind of held up their end of the bargain there. And Dublin City Council have to drive things on. The last I heard you speak about this, you were saying 2028 is not unreasonable at all.
Yeah, I think that the next season will be our last season in the stadium. And I think there's a couple of things that are going to happen in the next kind of few weeks. And there's been questions into to DCC that are on record. So I think, look, the council have been excellent. It's the whole process, I think it's fair to say, has been slower than anyone would have hoped. Us being top of that list. But I think we have to kind of, I suppose, maybe we were a bit naive. 2015, the council took ownership of Daily Mount. I think that was a great thing for the stadium that happened. It's secured its long-term future. It's in public ownership, and it's a big site that we were never going to be able to develop that site in the way it deserves to be. This does that, and yeah, I think 2026 will be our last season in there, and then it's a case that we've a very difficult 3 years. Biggest challenge at Bose in the next couple of years is trying to simultaneously remain competitive in men's and women's football. Build our academy at the Oscar Trainer Centre. I was out there this morning with Pat Fenlon, and there's great work going on out there. We got a big sports capital grant. It's really starting to look excellent. I think it's the best academy facility right now in the country, and I think that people can go and see it for themselves. There's a lot of work going to happen out there, but the number one challenge on top of all of them is navigating the period out of Daily Mount and back into Daily Mount, because, like I said, there's a lot of pressure, a lot of wage inflation in the league. And it's very difficult. And you can see how close the table is. The difference between being second and seventh is really not that much at all. So we have to try and navigate all of these things, and that will be a challenge. But coming into that new stadium is something that will really, it's going to be a very big moment for us.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny. People I spoke to, one of the things they say about the new stadium is, I'm not sure 8,000 is the right number anymore.
Yeah. So I think when we first sat down to do this, there was a feasibility study done. I can remember it clearly. It was option 3A was the one, and that was what landed in at this number. It was actually originally 6, and we really pushed for more. Will it be big enough or not? It's very hard to say. I do think that, as I said, we'll sell out every week, and I think that scarcity in terms of tickets is a very good thing to maintain demand. And if it was 12, say, I'd hazard at 12,000, our average attendance over a season would be lower, because people would maybe feel they could get a ticket all the time. Okay. There are site constraints, and look, probably the main thing is there's a lot of public money being spent on Daily Mount. I'm entirely comfortable with that. I feel that Bose delivers for not just Dublin, I think for Ireland, it delivers socially. We got an independent study done recently, 8.5 million a year in social value. We deliver a lot economically. There's VAT on our shirts, the economic impact in Fibsbury. And I do think that on both of those, and also health and wellness, all of the things that comes with a football club, intergenerational shared experience, we've, I think, 60 youth teams, and all the work that we do, in different parts of football, whether it's, kids with sight loss, the only one in Leinster, the amputee team, etc. We deliver for Ireland. Bose is a good thing. Bose should be able to access large state funding, because it will deliver in spades back the cost of that stadium. But it is still public money, and I think your stadium is going to be whatever it is, 50 million or so. Is it justifiable that was 70 or 80? I don't know where that line is. Sure. I do think more should be spent on sport, and I hope that other clubs in the league receive similar supports, albeit I do think our ownership model delivers a bit more back.
Where will you play when the stadium's been built?
I don't know. We're having those discussions now, and I'd be foolish to give an indication on it. I think somebody, whether it's another League of Ireland club or another entity, somebody's going to have to do us a favour, there will be obviously a financial arrangement for it, but especially if it's another League of Ireland club, I think it's fair to say 15 years ago, 20 years ago, like lots of clubs like played at Dalymount, Rovers played at Dalymount. I think back then, clubs looked at the rent and that was it. Obviously, as the league has grown and professionalised, having another team in is probably hassle. But I do think as part of the process of the league improving, it's Dalymount now, whether it's, and I won't go through the clubs, but lots of clubs need to redevelop their grounds, not just us. So it could be a favour returned in the future type of situation. And I think wherever we end up, it's a necessary kind of, it's a problem that needs to be solved for us to kick the league on.
Yeah. In Dublin, I presume. That's kind of a non-negotiable.
I think that's a definite,
yeah. North side?
I'm not going to go any further than Dublin.
I saw RDS being talked about as well. Like all these options are out there, are they?
We've met the RDS and we're meeting the RDS and we're trying to have, I think the RDS wouldn't work for every game. The horse show and other things on there wouldn't permit it. I think it could be a good option for some bigger games. We're going to have to be smart financially when we're out at Dalymount, as I said, to be sustainable given our model. I also think, the Aviva game this year, I was very confident in that game. A lot of people around the club were seeing other people, it won't get 15,000 and we got 34,000 in there.
Does that make that financially a success then? Like it's covered off the cost of renting the Aviva and policing or whatever?
Yeah. No, we made it we made a decent amount of money moving the game there, and that was the intention. There was a couple of different reasons to do it. I was very curious to see what is the demand for Bose Rovers? When you put it in a stadium like the Aviva, and that question was answered. I think a lot of credit to Shamrock Rovers, to John Martin, who's since moved on. I found John excellent. I think he'll be a great asset to the FAI. Really good CEO at Rovers, and I think that I'd kind of looked at doing that a couple of years ago and spoken about it, and there was always this thing around the league, and sometimes we don't sell ourselves well enough. And you couldn't have Bose Rovers in the Aviva. Should there be fights all over Balls Bridge? None of that came to pass. People mixed in pubs, and look, is it a high risk game in terms of security? It still is, but we demonstrated there that the two clubs' fan bases could go have a great day out, and there was no incidents, and that's an important thing as well.
Yeah, there's obviously talk, but to be fair, forever and a day, but it seems to have a certain kind of substance now of League of Ireland breaking away from FAI. Are you in favour of that?
I definitely think that it's something that shouldn't be written off. I think it's fair to say a couple of things in the FAI. Like one, I think there's brilliant people out there. I think people out there do their absolute best. I think that the organisation has found itself in a very difficult place due to decades of mismanagement, and with a CEO there that was obviously has left a lame organisation in many ways. And I think that at times that isn't particularly helpful when you've got the League of Ireland now who's really made massive strides, and obviously you're tied to an organisation that's brand value is pretty low, and I don't actually place that blame with any of the people there at the moment. I think they're doing an excellent job. I think in particular the league office, they deserve huge credit. I think coming in, the work that league office, I won't name all of them, but in particular Mark Scanlon and Will Clark, the work that they put in is unbelievable. And I think it's a difficult thing in role to play a league director, because you got to be impartial. There's got to be things people aren't happy with, and it's a position where it's easy for people to have a go at you. My view on the league offices is they've done a great job, but they've limited resources, very limited resources. And is it a case that I don't like breakaway, because I think that in any league internationally, we are an outlier. I think there's only 2 leagues in Europe. I could be wrong on that, but there's not many where Premier Division sits fully under an association. so I do. So even if there was to be an independent league, because I think that the FAI will always have an involvement.
Yeah.
They obviously have to oversee things. So I
It doesn't have to mean we're at war
no,
with
you have
two
to work
separate
together.
entities, even if there is a quote unquote breakaway. Yeah.
Totally, they're the member of UEFA and they'd oversee lots of things.
To work together. Do you suspect it will happen?
I think it probably will. Yeah, and I think that for me the biggest impediment to that, and maybe it's changed, but I'm not fully. Maybe there weren't enough full-time professional people at football clubs, and I include Bohemians in that. So when I took on the role in 2020, there was me. Lynn O'Neill, who'd worked for Bose for 40 years. Now we've increased our staff numbers since then, and brilliant people in Bohemians. Jimmy's unbelievable, who works with me, and then there's been a number of new people join in the last couple of months, as well as an amazing community office and Sean and Avian. So I do think clubs need to be professional if they're going to engage in an independent league.
Yeah.
There needs to be representatives at clubs who can do that, and I think that the mindset, and it's shifting dramatically. If you take the Bohs Rovers game, us working together, the mindset of clubs has to be growing the whole thing is good for everybody. Sharing information, working together, a good transfer fee for another club, that shouldn't be something you see and say, you should celebrate that. And I think that that's increasingly the perspective that club owners and fan-owned clubs are taking.
Yeah, that all sounds so positive. So like, you take the next 10, 20 years, which goes quickly. Mm-hmm. Where do you think the league will be?
I think the biggest problem for the league is facilities. I think that, there are things that we can do, but ultimately, if we take Dalymount, like the first meeting that we had in Dalymount was 2011, the year I joined the board. I think Leo Varadkar was Minister for Sport. Joe Costello at the time did the club a huge amount of work. Doesn't get the credit now later on, but Joe was really the instigator of bringing us into the Dáil, trying to save Dalymount. But if you take it, say next season is our last season and we're out for 17 and 18, it's 18 years between. And Bose, as I said, Bose, if there's going to be a club that's easier maybe to move through to get state support, it's fan-owned club.
Yeah.
We have a GA model, also Sligo, who got a big sports infrastructure grant as well, and fair play to them. If that stayed true for each of the other clubs, there are stadium, again, like, people will know where they are themselves if you go to games. If that's going to replicate you around the ground, that's the big hindrance. You need to have infrastructure there. And on top of that, clubs are trying to develop. The advent of the women's game has been brilliant. We were late to it, and there's obviously clubs who've led the way there. But that's still an area of the club that's a net cost. Academies, big cost. We spend about $500,000 a year in academies. There's obviously good soundings lately, and I really do think it's something the state should support, and looks like they will. But you have those interests trying to remain in the division, trying to develop your stadium, trying to develop your training ground. Football, League of Ireland clubs, for whatever reason, whether it was they were poor at selling themselves, whether they were mismanaged, whether it was partly the association being mismanaged, but they don't get what they deserve. Like I grew up playing for Nafina. Nafina is a brilliant GA club. I'm a big fan of the GA. The GA is rightly seen as a positive thing in Irish sport, a positive thing in Irish society.
Yeah. And
I think League of Ireland clubs should be seen in a similar light. It's a professional game. And there are, I understand the admiration that comes with an amateur game, but the clubs deliver a lot for the communities, all of them.
100%.
So
yeah,
maybe that's part of the change.
Yeah. I didn't realize Kneecap started just with random drinks and a night out in Belfast.
Yeah,
you were big into your music. So at what point after drinks did they say you should manage us?
I was just just went to Belfast for just to meet a mate up there who was studying, and he's a historian. So he was like, "We'll have a wander around, and if you're drinking with a historian in a city that you don't know a ton about, bar the conflict, back to the United Irish, whenever, it's quite interesting." And we were in the last pub, and just bumped into them. Like they recognised Rady, and we got chatting, and I think they were coming to Dublin like maybe a couple of weeks later, and they said we'll do a gig in Bang Bang. Before their gig in the Workman's, and they played in Bang Bang. There's got to be a video somewhere to like 24 people or something,
right,
on the counters, and raised money for Palestine. And then they stayed with us afterwards, and they're great. I could never say enough. Like they're unbelievably sound and good people, more than anything, And I'd managed an artist before, and it was really interesting. But I left it thinking I don't want to do that again. And obviously, like, Rady's an artist, loads of friends who are artists, and. But I've always loved music. Like, I really DJ'd for years. Really, music would be, I've had to pick between a record collection or a telly. I'll be picking the records. But Yeah, they asked, and it was just I liked them so much, to be honest. You know, I said to them, "Look, I'm happy to help. I don't want anything from it. I don't want any money. I just want to. I'll give you that because they're just sound. To be fair, they're just and they're kind of infectious. They're a lot of fun to hang out with, and just to spend time with as a group and as just as individuals. And yeah, it's totally a chance thing.
Yeah. So I know they're going a long time now, and that first single is 17, first album is 18. Like me, I'm so out of touch with the world, you know. So I first hear about them through the film. Maybe that's a common experience. Was the film like a marked? We've gone massive now. Was that a big difference?
Yeah,
That's 2020. So that's only that's like last year, really.
Yeah,
That it's gone to another level.
yeah. The band was like, I suppose there was a mixtape in whatever it was, 2019, but the first album was actually last year. But like, I suppose I saw the lads that night after they came in when I wasn't managing them, they played in the Workman's and it was full, and I'd never seen anything just like, because obviously, you know, it's hip hop, it's in Irish.
Yeah.
The iconography they use, and there's a lot of humor in it, like there's a lot of satire, and there's also really serious points to be made, and they mix up this at times, you know, total absurdity with very, very smart takes on societal issues. And but yeah, the like, I suppose the lads had a good, really big following, and they were going around doing gigs, and you know, they could sell, you know, decent amount of tickets across Ireland. And we were going on tours in England. And one tour drove them I drove them myself. We went from Belfast to Glasgow, the whole way down to Southampton, and you could see the crowds were growing, and they're kind of 500-600 caps in England. And initially, it was, you know, Irish people in England. That's obviously changed dramatically. But the film kind of told, and it tells. It's obviously like it's dramatized, but there's a lot of bits in it that are true as well. And you know, it's obviously it's just huge credit to, you know, to the people behind the film. It could have been terrible. I was worried. I said to them, I was worried it would be because it should be crap. Like, debut director, music's very difficult to convey in film, as is football, and you know, Irish language, like, it should be crap. And I thought, if this is crap, because the music career was, you know, was going pretty well.
Okay.
It was slower. This gave it a huge kind of boost, but didn't expect it to be as good, and mainly that they were such unbelievable actors. They'd never acted, any of them. So you'd make a film where debut director, half in Irish, about musicians with a low budget, and they've never acted.
And Michael Fassbender to show them up. Yeah. So reflections on the last year. Like, we've been trying to have this chat with you for a while, but you're over in court quite a bit. Like, you're a hard man to get hold of. So Macara charged under the Terrorism Act in May for displaying a Hezbollah flag in November 24. And I think this was thrown out owing largely to a technical error, as in the case against them wasn't registered in time, therefore it's not going to proceed. So it kind of over before it started. So that's been a big thing. Coachella, big controversy there, where at Coachella they put up a message, Israel committing genocide against the Palestinian people, enabled by the US, kicks off a big thing in the US, as you can imagine. And then in the midst of it all, video from November 23 resurfaces. The only good Tory is a dead Tory, kill your local MP. That surfaces in 25. The Met investigate that. That is also past, I think, the statutory time limit, so doesn't go anywhere. Keir Starmer's calling them out. Shouldn't be at Glastonbury, inappropriate. So what's your perspective on what's happened in the last year on that front? What's kind of going on here?
Well, what happened in the last year is that there was, because I've seen it, and this is not, I'm not a conspiratorial person. I've all the emails to back it up. Some of them were leaked, but the fact is that that point at Coachella doesn't, and it's taken me a while to kind of mull over this and get perspective on it. But there's an acceptable face in America of protest, right? And at Coachella, other bands, I won't name them, and well done to them. This is better than not doing anything. Other bands went there and had a flag on their drum kit or something. That is the acceptable face in America of Palestinian solidarity. And I'm sure the organizer of Coachella and the US State Department or whatever would say, well, look, you know, you can do that, you know. But if you actually say what the lad said, which was entirely correct, and they say it like they said it, I don't even think it was the act that they said it. It was a response of the people at Coachella. So I suppose I probably would have, and to kind of, you know, it's not right, but I would have probably started. It's a very expensive place. It's essentially a bit of a playground of wealthy young Americans in a desert, and you know, I would have looked at the audience at Kneecap and kind of maybe stereotyped a lot of them as people who weren't politically aware and were probably, you know, just kind of upper middle class kids. And when the lads gave the speech and led the chant, everyone in that tent was chanting Free Palestine. The whole thing, I couldn't believe it.
Well, the American youth are on in a very different place.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that this could have been, and I remember thinking this could be Belfast or it could be Glasgow. Right. And yeah, like there was stuff afterwards, like Jewish people ran from the tent, like all lies. I was standing beside two Jewish booking agents who were trying to poach us. They loved it. Afterwards we met other bands who were playing. The lads were really unbelievably well received by both by the festival organisers, other bands, and the audience there.
Right.
And what happened was, and it took me ages to realise this, that like what is an existential threat to the Zionist movement? Losing America. Where do you start to lose America? You lose young people. And where can you start to lose young people in the cultural space? Are Kneecap a direct threat to Zionism? No, they're not. But could they be the spark that gets that other band who has the flag, who has 10,000 or 50,000 at their gig? What if they start to speak like that? And I'm certain that that's what happened. And from that, you had Sharon Osbourne. Now that group, and people should Google this group, Creative Community for Peace. Across the planet, there are entities purportedly exist to combat anti-Semitism, and they are extensions of the State of Israel, and they act to silence Palestinian voices. That group deny apartheid. They stand in direct opposition to the BDS movement, and they say it on their own website. They take a top-down approach to combat BDS. Top-down means that there are very, very important people within the music industry, and they're all named on that website. Sharon Osbourne's one of them. The guy David Levy, whose letter was leaked, he's another one. And they sought out to absolutely destroy Kneecap. And they made a couple of assumptions. One, that the lads don't have the level of intelligence that they do. Number two, that we wouldn't get the level of professional sport we got, like as in a legal team. And three, I suppose, that we weren't smart enough as a group, and I include all of the people who work with Kneecap, in that we would fold, that we would just not be able to cope. And when we say resurface, nothing resurfaced. They use an AI tool to go through every single video and every single interview the band had ever done. You can take hundreds of examples, because I have them and I drew them up in preparation for court and we didn't need them, that Kneecap speak about being against violence, anti-sectarianism, about being for peace and, you know, solidarity with the working class. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of interviews. There was about 16 seconds from thousands of hours of footage that was garnered, and it was spun out to the media, and it was to try and paint them lads in a picture that is just not true at all. And like, you know, it was a kind of an amazing thing to see in a very scary way. But you had, whether it was US Congress people, you had, you know, the Prime Minister of Britain, whether it was, you know, the state apparatus, the judiciary, the police, you know, to bring about terrorism charges. The reason they brought that charge was to try and restrict them travelling. It was about how we're not just going to try and kill them in the court of public opinion, we're going to try and kill their ability to act as a band. And we've beaten that. And that's to everybody's credit, to Darragh Mack and the legal team, to the lads themselves, to the people who helped us, to the people who shared emails with us that we shouldn't have seen. Well done to all of those people who'll never be named. And, you know, what was funny about this whole thing is that at the start, when you take the lads come from three working class backgrounds. Their families, their communities deserve massive credit for who they are. Like JJ's from the Cregan, you know, for anyone who's been to the Cregan has had a pretty tough history. It's been, you know, the people in the Cregan have been oppressed massively by the British state. And
James McLean.
Yeah, and West Belfast, where the lads are from, they're difficult communities, but amazing communities. Same way, like when I grew up in Finglas, in a place that's Knockdalaw. Brilliant people who are passionate about, you know, their community and improving things. But the lads come from those communities, and whether it was the movie originally or Sony buying the movie, or I remember somebody, and I've said it, saying in Sony, you have to stop talking about Palestine. This could go to the Oscars. You want to go to the Oscars? Right. I'm like, well, we don't want to go to the Oscars. The lads aren't going to stop. So if they have to choose between silence and the Oscars, I can tell you what they're going to choose. And they couldn't understand that. And I think what happened was in the last year, prior to Coachella, in America, and like, the lads performed on the Jimmy Fallon show and movie, and there was Oscars and
it's happening. You're off. Yeah,
you're in the tent or whatever. Yeah. The BAFTAs in England. Was it that they saw on the lads, those kind of establishment people, kind of working class lads, bit edgy. But as soon as they overstepped the mark and said something that establishment didn't want them to say, they tried to kill them. And it's a very interesting kind of thing to witness. And yeah, so I think like the lads have you know, no regrets. The whole thing was, and the media served it. The amount of time spent talking about this stuff was absolutely ludicrous. So it was a very well orchestrated campaign. and it failed. And the letter, and people, it was well publicised. That letter from David Levy that went around was unbelievably libelous against the lads, and was circulated amongst 52 of the most powerful people in music. They're all listed on it, and they were setting out to stop them playing Glastonbury. And if we had lost Glastonbury, it would have been extremely damaging to the band. And huge thanks to the Eavis family and the people at Glastonbury that actually said we're going to just allow Kneecap perform. They got one of the biggest crowds of the weekend. You know, there was nothing in their set that was illegal, even though the police investigated for no reason. They tweet out that they're investigating their set, and a month later we get an email to say it's dropped. That's how they operate in Britain. They try and kill you publicly, and quietly then it goes away. And I'm really happy that we got to embarrass them last week.
Yeah. I certainly have no agenda. Like, I could understand, you know, why the families of Joe Cox, David Amos didn't like the only good Tory, dead Tory, kill your MP. And I know the lads apologised to for any hurt caused, not intended. And I've heard you do it before, and I do understand the point that there's a performative aspect to what they're doing. They're on stage, things are said with extra verve. Not everything should or can be taken literally. You've got to give people credit. Now, it's not from me. I don't love it. But fair enough, each of their own, you know what I mean? But I did understand that point. On the Hezbollah thing, the flag, the lads that condone violence, or don't rather condone violence, condemn violence. And it didn't strike me as in keeping with so much what they're about even either. Like, you take Hezbollah as well as fighting Israel, I suppose, in a blunt sense. I mean, so outrageously homophobic. And I don't, the lads refused to play Pride because they thought it was nonsense, corporate bullshit, piggybacking on it. You've talked about Bose and the LGBT movement. I don't think you're hanging out with homophobes in any great way. But that's just one small aspect of Hezbollah. And so it struck me as the flag thing. I was like, how deeply has he looked into this? Is this a moment of, or just someone's thrown the flag, or I've brought the flag out? I don't even know which one of the two it was.
The flag is thrown onto the
right.
stage,
Okay, and he picks it up, and
yeah. And on the first one, I say, so I gave so many examples on a radio show earlier on this year. There was people who've said Glastonbury should be bombed because Jeremy Corbyn's there. There was the Frank Hester, largest donator to the Tory party conference, said in private in a room that Diane Abbott should be shot.
Yeah.
She's an actual MP. He said that he basically, and he made a racial slur against her as well, I think, and I actually don't take that one for fact, but there was something in there. But essentially what I'm saying is that there's been things said. A man in a private room who's a Tory party funder saying that someone should be shot, right? Is there an indication there of incitement to violence, right? Somebody in a room where there's 1,400 people and it was a joke, a total joke where everyone laughed. There was no intent behind that. And if you were to take out comedian sets and pull one line and debate that on a news show, it takes on an entirely new context. So and I think the lads were right to apologise. If they've caused someone hurt, it's always right to apologise, inadvertently or not. But the fact that was pulled, there was 1,400 people in a room. I think that gig was in Sheffield or something. Right. Not one of them saw fit to go to the police, report something, or say, I've heard something here that's incitement to hate, because it wasn't. It simply wasn't. And I think that, the lads have spoken about the flag thrown onto the stage and it's picked up as part of a performance to somehow that constitutes terrorism is, again, ludicrous. Hezbollah was prescribed in the UK in 2019 because Jeremy Corbyn went to visit them. Hezbollah are part of the government of Lebanon. They're actually part of the government of Lebanon. So it's likewise, do we agree, I suppose, with, am I a DUP supporter? Absolutely not, right? Are the DUP, who are also, I think, fair to say, quite homophobic, they are part of the government of the North. So this idea, I often think that, the whole idea of, and I suppose, when I studied my masters, of the word terrorist, it's the most crazy word. It's used by people to discredit other people. Are Hezbollah a great organisation, and should people be going around? No, that's not. But I think that the idea that what happened here and what I outlined to you was that the lads went to Coachella. Everything came after Coachella.
Okay.
That line can't be it's not that that we or anyone's imagining that all this happened just coincidentally.
Right.
It happened because a group of people in California who are part of Creative Community for Peace and have unbelievably good contacts. If you read just look at who they are. They decided to take the band down, and they failed at that. And I think that Kneecap's comments, over many, many years in hundreds and thousands of interviews, that communicates who they are. I think focusing in on two things, they're young lads, they're doing gigs. What they do, and the comment, especially on the MP comment, it was entirely a joke. And anyone who was there it's very difficult for us to sit here in a room and say,
Yeah, yeah.
well, there's the words. Did they say it? What did it mean? You know?
Yeah, it's not a statement on their website.
Yeah,
Their
and,
manifesto,
and what
yeah,
they've said on record is that they look, they come from a place that's witnessed sectarian killings. You know, that is the last thing that the lads support, condone, would try and you know, champion. The last thing they've done the very opposite.
Yeah. Will you be involved with Bohemians for years and years to come, or what's the plan?
I don't know what my plan is long term. Just try and look. I think one, in terms of staying in a role, I think that, you know, no organization is in a good place if someone stays in a role forever. You know, I'm a firm believer of that. I think that when we get to the new stadium, it's going to be a huge. It's going to be a very sad time in many ways. The lights coming down, all of these things. But the membership, like the club is the membership. The club is not the board. It's not employees. It's the membership, and the membership should take. You should really congratulate themselves when we do that, because, you know, we went very close to losing that stadium, and to then, whatever it'll be, 20 years later or 18 years later, that we're still there. That Dublin keeps it. You know, that stays where it was, all the history of the ground, and that it's rebuilt and it'll serve football and Bose and the community for another 100 years. That's something that people should really congratulate themselves as a collective.
Yeah, be amazing. One last thing. I know you got to shoot. You're busy. I saw you and your wife Rady talking publicly not so long ago about your daughter who was diagnosed with autism, and I think anyone who's experienced trying to get help and get into services will relate. You were both just making the point. This is so difficult at every turn, so slow, when early intervention is very, very important, and we just have to do a bit better than this.
Yeah, it's still the same. It's what's probably, like, I suppose everyone probably does this. I'd never considered autism as a thing. You know, it wasn't something that was in my. I knew it existed. I just never thought about it because I was like, doesn't impact me. You know, and until it did, you know, I hadn't given it any thought. And then you realize, I suppose, and this is again like, but you know, one of the things we spoke on earlier, like how can you have the financial figures that Ireland has, and it's just not good enough anymore for years. And I remember like trying to figure out things, and then you're obviously like, you're upset yourself. This isn't something you expected. You're trying to figure out, you know, what the best route forward is, and realize that it is so bad. And there's people being campaigning for decades, and there's people who've told their story and it hasn't changed, and the services are dreadful and they're not improving. And ultimately, I suppose we've set up a state that you know, certain sectors or industries or whatever just can operate in an unbelievably efficient way because they're contributing to global capital. And if you sit outside of that, or an individual with autism, and there's so many other examples of services, it's dreadful, and it's still dreadful, and it's not going to. That's the main thing. I don't think it's going to change. I actually don't think. The more what people tell you in the HSE when you speak to them, or people tell you in Department of Education, or anyone you speak to, they kind of say, look, they're embarrassed. Massive credit to everyone who works in the sector, because they're understaffed, under-resourced. The resources aren't there for them, and they're trying to do their best in a situation where they know that this is failing kids, failing thousands of kids.
Yeah. I spoke to someone who, they went for an initial assessment and they were told, right, okay, yeah, early intervention list, you're on it. Back to you in about a year. Yeah. You know, you're tearing your hair out because it's your child.
No, totally.
You know, it's horrendous.
Yeah, there's so many people in that, you know, in that situation, and we have to be able to. It's what's sad. Look at, you say, oh, we have to be able to do better and all, and you hear, you know, so many ministers over the years that will improve this or that, but it hasn't changed, and it's not a good place for anyone who's in that. What I would say is, and it probably, since I did that interview, there's great support groups of parents. There's loads of them around the city, and there's one called Embrace in Dublin 9. There's other ones where they're WhatsApp groups and people who maybe have information, and they're actually, you know, and it shouldn't be that way. The state should be providing the support needed. But if anyone's listening and hasn't, those kind of local groups of parents are probably the best thing to sign up for.
And if anyone's listening who's just at the start of that journey, because even you talked there about the initial upset, like it's not your vision. We all, you know, the 9 months and then the initial stages, you have a vision of the father I'll be or the parent I'll be in the years ahead, and then that gets disrupted quite significantly. That period of upset, I would think, is very, very real and very strange. And then, but equally, you've got your child who you absolutely adore and love, and so you know that hasn't changed. You don't feel too selfish about like
Yeah.
you would imagine it was going to be either. A lot of conflicting kind of feelings, I would guess, from the outside. I've never been through it.
Yeah, no, totally. There's no roadmap, like, because obviously for a period of whatever 18 months, you don't know.
Yes.
And then you start thinking, oh, maybe, and then you get an assessment, which is a real battle, and to be fair, Rayleigh did all the work on that, and then you're trying, and there's no look with autism, no two kids are exactly the same, and then that's something you're thinking, but no one can tell you. She might have words, she might not. It might be 5, might be 12, might never have. So it's a really
that's tough.
Yeah, it's a tough thing, to be fair. It is, and I think that I'm probably lucky. Whatever my mind says, I'll be quite. I like to have tasks to do, so kind of focus on, well, do this and do this and do this. Whereas, and not dwell too much, or maybe on the emotional side of it. That's probably a lucky trait to have in this situation. You're going to focus on the next thing to do. But it's just insane that we have, a health system in a country as rich as Ireland that fails so many kids, and will fail kids. I've no doubt, sadly, that kids that aren't born yet and won't be born for years to come, they'll be failed by the same system, and that should be, the lowest bar of society should be to look after kids who need help in whatever way that is. That shouldn't be something that needs to be fixed. It should be fixed before anything else. So yeah.
Best of luck with it.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming in. Fascinating chat. Dan Lambert, thanks.
Sound.